Citizen Sleeve!
Hello, I am Citizen Sleeve! And with the recently announced PlayStation Classic, I thought it might be a decent idea to have a little bit of a chat about classic mini consoles in general. Now, they've been around for a very long time, from the Atari 2600 collection being shoved onto a replica joystick to the Sega deal with games and those really quite terribly built mini replica Mega Drive and Game Gears. But then, a few years ago, Nintendo says, hey, we've got this NES Classic Mini Edition over here if anyone's interested. And lo and behold, every gamer with nostalgic bone in their body says, hell yes! And by the time they've said that, it's out of stock on the whole of planet Earth. But hey, 30 games across the breadth of Nintendo's library, including first party and third party. A tiny little controller cable, tiny, that you have to pull the whole thing onto the floor because the HDMI cable is so much longer than that tiny little cable, Nintendo. Oh, get a wireless pad, seriously. It'll work on the SNES Classic as well, so all good. Then the SNES Classic a year later, 21 games. The pull for that, apart from the other classics, was Star Fox 2, never released before. 2 pads, slightly longer cables, $80, a bit more expensive than the $60 for the NES Classic. And just before we move on from Nintendo, the inevitable N64 Classic has to be mentioned. Patents have already been found with regard to it, but we'll get to that at a later video. And boom, 2018, December 3rd, we have Sony's PlayStation Classic. $100, so 20 more than the SNES Classic. Same principle, 20 pre-installed games, 5 have been announced so far. 2 controllers, but not analog based, which means any games after 1997 may not get into the collection purely because they won't be fully controllable. Now, let's go through the initial games then. So we have got Final Fantasy VII, a given, Ridge Racer Type 4, Wild Arms, Jumping Flash, and Tekken 3. So not a bad 5, but if you're pre-ordering it, like I have done, yes I know, I'm so sorry, then you don't know what you're getting for the rest of those 15 games. Now Sony has said they're working region by region to make sure that certain games that are more nostalgic in those regions will be on the system, and of course for different licensing issues across those different regions. But what else do we want to see on this little 3D printed emulation box? Well, there's quite a lot of decent PlayStation games, but a lot of the videos I've seen on this subject matter, it really is a pure wish list because most of these games, due to licensing issues or remakes, probably aren't going to make it. So let's just have a quick gander first of all. So I think Konami have got a good shout of getting a good amount of games on here, partly because they're not doing anything with them, apart from pachinko machines at this point. So you've got Metal Gear Solid, a classic, a genre-defining game, synonymous with the PlayStation. You've got Castlevania Symphony of the Night, again synonymous with the PlayStation, probably the best Castlevania there is. Then, one of my favourites, you've got Silent Hill, the absolute genius that is Silent Hill, a true classic survival horror, another game completely synonymous with the PlayStation. Now after that, we can look at things from Capcom perhaps. Resident Evil 2. Number 1 has been remade loads of times at this point, and number 2 is about to get its full Uber remake in January 2019. So are Capcom really going to want to have the original on this system prior to that coming out? Or are they going to think it might jog people's memories to then want the new remake edition when that comes out? So that'll be interesting to see. I wouldn't mind Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, because that isn't coming out anywhere else anytime soon, and it might be a cracking little addition that sidesteps the Resident Evil problem. You've got Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, and I would love that to be on there. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be, but we'll see. I'd love it to be on there. I think it's an amazing game. You've got Final Fantasy 8 and 9, both of which I really like, but you've got Tactics as well. So how many Final Fantasies do you put on the same system when you've only got 20 slots? Parappa the Rapper is first party, it's a bit quirky, bit imaginative, I guess. Rhythm game. They might put it on there. They might. It's quite iconic. Vagrant Story, great RPG. That could go on there. Gran Turismo 2. Now, a lot of people have talked about this, and it's just not going to happen, guys. It's not. Too many licenses, I think. Car brands, tyre brands, sport general brands that relate to motoring. I can't see them being able to get all those licenses sorted for that kind of release. Crash and Spyro as well. Activision own these now. Crash Trilogy, been out for a while. Spyro Trilogy coming very soon, end of the year, November, I think. So why would they let the licenses for those two classic games appear on the system, despite them being proper mascots in a platforming sense for the PlayStation? You could go with Crash Team Racing, because that's not on anything else, hasn't been remade to my knowledge, would suit the system or give it its kart racer if you like. So I think that could be one. Chrono Cross, I really hope I see. Love Chrono Trigger, classic RPG, and Chrono Cross is the kind of great, massive, story-driven RPG that would really suit the PlayStation and give it some value, I think. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 should probably be on there, but not really my cup of tea, although I know a lot of people hold it in some serious high esteem. Again, Activision, again, possible license issue. Street Fighter Alpha 3, I think should probably be on there. Get Street Fighter on there, 2D Fighter, along with Tekken 3, sorted, and I'm sure Capcom got no problem with that kind of license. Suikoden 2 is another one I think people will want on there. Then you got things like Oddworld, Odyssey, but that's been released before. Parasite Eve could be a very interesting one to have on there, because I haven't seen that anywhere else, I don't think, really. One has to be a given, and that's a Wipeout game, because PlayStation is Wipeout, and Wipeout is PlayStation. So whether it's 2097 or XL, a Wipeout of some kind has to be on that classic. You've got Twisted Metal 2 as well, that could be cool, that could be on there, don't see any reason why not. Maybe a Tomb Raider? Tomb Raider is pretty well aligned with the PlayStation brand, especially in those days. So maybe a Tomb Raider 1 or a 2? I think that would be pretty neat. Then you got other things like Klonoa, Bushido Blade, so there's a few extra games you could fit on there, but there's a decent wide range there. Just a lot of them might have major licensing issues. Okay, now let's talk the controllers. So, one game I don't think will be on there, because the controllers don't have the analog sticks, is Ape Escape. Now, Ape Escape's first party, it's a no-brainer to chuck on this classic system. But without those analog sticks, I'm fairly certain there are things you can't do in-game that you need those sticks for. So that one might be out, I'm afraid. So let's talk cost real quick. $50, $60 was the NES Classic. The SNES Classic 2 pads, obviously, was $80. And this PlayStation Classic is going to hit that $100 mark. You get your 20 games, you get the form factor of the PlayStation, you get no post-launch ability to upgrade, as we've seen with all the other prior NES and SNES consoles classics. It's locked to what you get. And, yeah, it's a bit expensive, isn't it? Especially with 2 pads that are just D-pad only originals and don't include those thumbsticks. There's a few other issues. The scaler. Now, from what I've read, this is not going to be a great scaler. So if you're watching this stuff or playing it on a 4K TV, you might find the scaler is not very good. And if you haven't got a good scaler on your TV that knows what to do with that particular resolution to make it look better, you might not end up with the most wonderful image on your expensive telly that you've ever had before. And one last thing to talk about, and maybe talk about in the comments with me as well, apart from what you want to see on this thing, do you even care? Do you think people should care? Are they a nice way to maintain old games? Are they just taken away from ROMs that are out there and people can play on PC, even though Nintendo have been shutting them down as quickly as they can? Do we actually think this is some company's answer to backwards compatibility? Now, you see Microsoft out there allowing you to play your own games from back in the day on disc or stuff you downloaded from the originals to the 360 stuff up to the modern era. And we get collections all the time, one-off old games released by different companies. Sega's just released their big collection Mega Drive games. You can get that almost anywhere. The Street Fighter collection. You can get a lot of this stuff that's third party almost on every other platform. So, is Sony doing this so they don't have to release PlayStation 1 games on the PS4? Like, it's done and dusted, that's your classics, there you go. Even though PS1 games really can't be that hard to emulate. You could buy them on the PS3, so I don't see why they wouldn't come eventually. And Nintendo with the Switch Online have given us a selection of 20, I believe it is. Some on the NES Classic, some not, that we can just play through an app on the Switch. I played it a little bit. It's essentially the classic NES with a few less options at the minute. But again, is it that their way of saying, hey, for now, these are classic games. We won't get to SNES for a while. You might get some NES on your Switch. But apart from that, we'll just leave it for a bit. Because I don't like that. I like the idea of these huge companies looking at the backwards compatibility, looking at the back catalogues, and actually allowing consumers to buy and play games they either already owned or want to own through one central system that works all the way down cascades between the generations. Obviously, some are more difficult than others. PS3, for instance, with its ridiculous cell processor, is not going to be a very easy thing to get emulated on the PS4. Just that hardware and replicating it is incredibly difficult. But are these little boxes just getting in the way of actual backwards compatibility? I think it's an important question. And I'll leave it there for now because I've gone on for way too long in this video. I just thought it was a really interesting topic. Essentially, 3D printed emulation boxes are becoming the thing. And I own 2 of them, so I don't know what I'm going to do with the PlayStation Classic. But what do you think? Are they a good thing? Are they nice for nostalgia? Are they good presents for people who are perhaps not gamers, or stuff you don't really ordinarily buy for people that you think, hey, this might get them back into it or give them that kick of nostalgia they like? Or do you just think they're a waste of money when a lot of the content you can get on other systems in a variety of other ways? Is it hindering backwards compatibility on many other systems? Or are you going to get one? If you are going to get one, including the PlayStation Classic, what games do you want to see that haven't been announced yet? Right, thank you very much for listening. If you liked the video, hit that like button, maybe even sub to the channel. If you didn't like the video, hit that dislike button. Not everybody likes everything. Take it easy. I shall see you very soon. Citizen Slave!